Hello, my friends. My name's Don Chapman. I'm the host of Origins. Thanks for joining us today. You know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. We're going to talk about a subject today that's in the news very much, and Michael Oord is our guest, and we're going to talk about global warming and how much of global warming, first of all, is global warming real, and secondly, how much of it is man-made. Is that kind of where we're going?
Yes, that's where we're going.
Why is it in the news so much?
Because a lot of people think that it's a great danger, that we're going to just cause so much heating, we're going to cause a huge amount of harms. And because of that, they want to try to nip it in the bud early.
Okay.
Even though it's claimed to be only 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880, they project it out into the future, much greater warming than that. And so and they really believe that this is going to be a serious issue.
There's two sides to this argument, I think. I hear some Christians say, listen, I'm going to heaven in a few years anyhow, who cares? What do we say to those folks?
Yes, that's the first question. Why should we even care? We should care because it's God's world. We should be concerned about what He made. And going back to Genesis, we are made stewards of God's creation. So we need to take care, we have dominion, and we're to take care of the creation. So based on that, we should be interested in the world and in environmental issues as well as global warming. So we need to check into this.
All right. So God said He made the world. He put us in charge of it. He said to Adam and Eve, I made this for you, but take care of it. And that's, we still have that
mandate.
That cultural mandate from God.
That's cultural mandate, yes. Even though that applied to the Garden of Eden, that still applies to us today. But you know, the confusion on this issue is just massive. You read all kinds of hysterical statements. You know, I read them all over the place in science magazines and in popular magazines. Here's one of the most outrageous ones. Holder, and this is during his confirmation hearing as Obama's science czar, he said this, but he affirmed one out of the mainstream position at his confirmation hearing by saying that 1 billion people could die by 2020 as a result of climate change. He can't possibly believe this. I mean, we've already gone, 4 years? And I don't think hardly anyone's died of climate change. They call it climate change now, not global warming, by the way.
And why do we change that?
Because they realize in the so-called warming periods, there's been some cooling periods, as I will get into. And even now, in the last 15 years, we've had no global warming. It's been flat. It's been kind of oscillating like this, but since about 1998, we have had no global warming, essentially. I want to talk a little bit more about this book.
Okay.
An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. There is lots of misstatements in this. I've watched the movie about 6 times and read the book. He makes such statements like the West Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheet will melt soon and add about 20 feet to sea level or more. You know, he makes a lot of statements that are really on the fringes of this. So
good time to buy beachfront property in Nevada, things like that. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, another statement someone once made is that this is the biggest issue that's ever faced humanity ever. That's the statement made by some. And other statements are that soon the only place we're going to be able to live is on Antarctica after the ice sheet melts.
Amazing. Well.
Yeah. So there's lots of hysteria out there. I mean, you get it from things like this, Time, be worried, be very worried. And of course, it shows up this little polar bear right there. And is he going extinct? Not really. It's generally steady state, according to Bjorn Lomborg, who's checked this out. They're not going extinct. They don't need to be in the endangered species list. So what should we as Christians do? And I think this is the way we should do with the issue of evolution in millions of years. Let's gather the facts. Let's see what the raw data looks like and get rid of the interpretations. We should be aware of bias. Bias is tremendous in this. And for ourselves, we should try to realize that we do have bias, but to be objective as can be. And this is what I'm going to try to do in my field of atmospheric science that I've worked in for over 40 years. So this is how I'm going to approach it. by applying this verse, my theme verse for all research. In fact, it's a theme, should be a theme verse for life. Examine everything carefully. That's beyond the superficial level. Get to the raw data. Hold fast to that which is good. The Bible is God's word, and Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Then I'm going to examine these issues, including global warming, which is right in my field and was not really too difficult to examine. So let's talk about the facts. I'm going to just keep to what do we know for sure, and then I'm going to try to let the facts speak for themselves. First, there's no consensus that man is causing all global warming and we must act now. Al Gore says there's a consensus, there's no disagreement. You can go to Arthur Robinson's website, and on it, 19,000 physical scientists have signed saying global warming is not all from man and not an immediate threat. 19,000 scientists have signed on.
They do a little game, I think, that they say all credible scientists agree with this. And then if you find a guy who doesn't agree, then they say, well, he's not credible because he doesn't agree. And it's kind of a circular argument, I think.
It is, and they do that especially with creationists.
Yes.
But they really can't get away with it in this area because there's some prominent atmospheric scientists and professors that disagree with this. For instance, Richard Lindzen, professor of meteorology at MIT, is an outspoken critic of man-caused global warming. Anyway, of those 19,000 physicists, I want to point out that there's 2,600 that are physicists, geophysicists, climatologists, meteorologists, oceanographers, and environmental scientists. And these are people that know about climate change. They might make a case that some of these guys maybe don't know enough about it to sign this, but these certainly do. So the point is, it's not a consensus. Number two, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have been increasing since about 1880. We know that. That's a fact because we've been measuring it. Before about 1959, we can tell some of these things from proxies and other more indirect indicators, but we've been actually measuring it since 1959, the carbon dioxide going up gradually. Actually, it's going up, and it's kind of accelerating up right now. Now, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So theoretically, if you do increase carbon dioxide, you should get global warming. But the question is, how much? How sensitive is it? That is what is so controversial and actually is still unknown. See, they run these computer models to try to find that out. They double carbon dioxide in the global climate model, leave all other variables the same, and see how it affects the temperature. See, that's how they work this. And they get some really scary results, as I'll get into. So the question really is though, how sensitive is it really? And I'm going to show you that it's not that sensitive at all. Number three, and this might be controversial to some people, but I believe global warming is real. The correct question really is how much is and is man responsible?
So you've got kind of a scope that it's, what'd you say, 1.2 degrees since 1880? But then we also need to say, okay, how much of this do we have no control over? Because we don't control a lot of things on the earth. God does. And how much of it are we responsible for? That becomes the big question, doesn't it?
That's because there are natural processes.
That's right.
Of climate change, as I will get into.
Okay.
And some evidence that global warming is real. Practically all the glaciers, which are sensitive to climate, have been receding since about 1880. And the Arctic sea ice has been decreasing over the years. This is in 2007 where it took a major drop. But then in 2008 and 2009 it actually increased 25%. But just this 2012 it dropped even more than this 2007 boundary right here. So global warming is real. We see other indication of this also.
Okay, there is ice melt, it's real.
Yeah. But we got to keep it in perspective. The warming is not mainly during the day, which would be more of a problem for drought, with the sun shining on causing more drought. Global warming is mainly at night, in the winter, and in the northern hemisphere.
So it's more localized. That's interesting.
Yeah, up in the, and especially the polar areas. It's the effect is strongest in the polar areas. I might add a little about when we talked about Arctic sea ice disappearing. Actually, the sea ice, you know, that's that ice that forms on the Antarctic Ocean during the cold season, has actually set records. And why that is the case, I don't know. But they're finding out that some of the ice on Antarctica, like the Antarctic Peninsula, a lot of that is decreasing. So why the sea ice has set records there for an increase while it's decreasing in the northern hemisphere, I don't know, and I don't think they know either. But I'll tell you one thing, they sure don't tell you about that.
No. We only give the facts that fit the paradigm, don't we?
Yes. Fourth, there are natural cycles of climate change, mainly from volcanism, which causes a cooling for a couple years, several years.
Volcanism is volcanoes.
Volcanoes going off, sending all those particles out in the stratosphere, and they slowly sink out. So the cooling effect by the reflection of sunlight back to space is about 1 to 3 years. El Nino, that causes a warming of about a year. Then there's ocean.
Tell us what El Nino is.
El Nino is a warm current that starts in the western Pacific and moves east towards Peru. Has tremendous effects on the food chain, and it also heats up the atmosphere. So in some places you get a lot of precip, in other places you don't get hardly any. So, but it causes a general warming of the atmosphere.
And it's not a permanent effect, it's a temporary effect. It happens sometimes, doesn't always happen.
Right. These first two are temporary. Okay. Now, oceanic changes, they're just starting to learn about these. There's long-term cycles of 30 years. This is subject that they're still learning, and this really hasn't been filtered into the whole equation yet. And then the sun. These cause long-term effects. I think the sun is the main natural phenomenon that's affecting global warming. For instance, you can correlate through tree rings, the long period part of tree rings, not the short period, and you find out that there's a medieval warm period, about 800 to 1000 AD. This is when the Vikings settled Greenland and farmed Greenland. Then from about 1300, 1400, you had the Little Ice Age, where practically all the glaciers in the world advanced.
Wow. To
about 1880, right in here. And then it's been global warming since.
So it seems like over the long haul, there's this warming, cooling that's just part of the long-term cycle.
Right. And you can correlate this with the effects of the sun based on sunspots being a measure of that.
Okay.
So let's take a look a little closer at the 20th century. You see three curves here. The carbon dioxide goes up slow, then it accelerates. Here's the temperature record, oscillates. It went up strongly between 1910 and 1940. Then we had global cooling to about 1975, right in there, and then it's been warming ever since. And then the sunspot cycle length is that red line. So which is more correlated to the temperature record? Is it the sunspot cycle length, or is it the carbon dioxide increase? Well, it's the sunspot cycle.
For sure.
So, and this was admitted by scientists in Physics Today. They said in 2008, these are the guys who analyze these things, we estimate that the sun could account for as much as 69% of the increase in the Earth's average temperature, depending on the total solar irradiance reconstruction used. So they think 69% could be natural, which means 31% would be man-made. I'm more conservative because it depends on which TSI, total solar irradiance, used, and I think they use the best one, so I would think they're probably more correct. But I'm going to say the sun is causing more than 50%, man is causing less than 50%, so I'm being more conservative.
Okay.
And of course, I told you about the cooling from 1940. You know, they thought the new ice age was coming, and I have 3 books on this topic. Here's one, The Weather Conspiracy, The Coming of the New Ice Age. Number 5, there is a strong bias towards the harm of global warming, ignoring positive benefits. Some of the positive benefits, more people die of the cold than the heat. So if we warm the temperatures, more people are going to be saved.
So even with global warming, it's not all bad.
No,
Yeah.
And of course, there's some radical environmentalists, I'm an environmentalist, but some that are, really radical, they think this is going to be bad, saving people, because
They
a
know
lot of
more
them
people.
think that there's too many of us. CO2 enhances plant growth. We can have better Arctic shipping. And of course, more agriculture further north, like in Canada. So these are some of the some of the good effects. And to back this up, Bjorn Lomborg, a radical environmentalist who changed his mind and became more conservative, says, and he's a professor of statistics at a Danish university, said in Europe as a whole, about 200,000 people die from excess heat each year. However, 1.5 million Europeans die annually from excess cold. That is more than 7 times the total number of heat deaths. That was an amazing fact. But still, that shows you that if you cause some global warming, you'll save more people.
Michael, we have to take a break. And folks, I don't want you to go away. Unless you die of global warming, you need to be with us for the rest of the show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Today's guest on Origins, Michael Ord, earned his Master of Science degree in Atmospheric Science and has retired from the National Weather Service after 30 years of service. He is currently a researcher and speaker for Creation Ministries International, where he has authored many creation articles and books, including Evidence for Creation and the Biblical Flood and Frozen in Time. Book orders are being taken at 800-616-1264. Mike can be reached at Creation Ministries International, P.O. Box 350, Powder Springs, Georgia 30127, or visit the website at creation.com.
We are back with Michael Ord, and we are talking about global warming and how much of it is man-made. And we've been making some great points. I think we've got you on record as saying that it could be as little as 30% or as much as 40-some% is man-made. Is that a fair range?
Yes, less than 50%.
Less than 50%. And the last point you made was a really good one, and that is that all the effects of global warming, which is real, aren't bad. There's more places to grow food, and people don't die from cold as much. So those are good things. Now, what's number 6?
Number 6 is that the cost to fight global warming is huge, and it's usually minimized by the alarmists. Now, Bjorn Lomborg has calculated this in the book Cool It. Now, he was a radical environmentalist. I believe he worked for Greenpeace, and he was actually challenged by someone to actually check into this data carefully instead of just give out this stuff that you heard. And since he's a professor of statistics at a Danish university, he did this. And he wrote a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist in 2002, and now he wrote this book called Cool It, which is an analysis of global warming. And since he's a professor of statistics, he's worked all these things out, like the cost. And here's what he says. In estimating the cost of the Kyoto, that's the treaty they made, Kyoto Protocol, the largest assembly of the top macroeconomic models shows an average cost of about $180 billion annually from 2008.
Now, forgive me, but you could feed a lot of people with $180 billion. Do you think that we're at a crisis point where the money should be spent there instead of helping the needy and the poor?
Yes, in fact, that was his point.
Yeah.
Help them to adapt to climate change and use the money for other things. That was his point. It costs too much. What would this do to the economies of all the nations if they did this? Yeah. Of course, the Western world would pay the fair share. It'd destroy practically all the economies.
So I'm going to come back and push one more time and say, why then was there such a huge pressure and push for the Kyoto Treaty?
Well, I come across statements like once in a while. I don't deal with these too much. I like to deal with the facts. But once in a while I get something like, well, we like this global warming because it can help us do global governance. I pick up on things like this once in a while, or it help us redistribute the wealth.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more sinister to this, but I'm going to stick to the facts.
All right.
But those things are there.
Yeah, they sure are. Thank you.
I'll let other people deal with that.
All right.
A seventh fact, computer climate models do not accurately represent temperature increase with a doubling of carbon dioxide, but alarmists take the results seriously. They use these flawed computer models. For instance, here's a schematic. And from about 1880, the temperature has just gone up about 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not very much. By the way, there's reasons where this global temperature record has lots of flaws in it. So it's probably exaggerated. Guys have looked at this saying sometimes the instruments are not situated right. They've changed instruments. The urban heat island effect is not totally taken out of the record. So this is probably exaggerated. But I will use 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
But I believe the effects of the sun are at least half that. So the real global warming by man, we'll say, is only 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But notice the extrapolation here by the models. That's the minimum by 2100. And even one model goes way up there, 11 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. So, and the alarmists believe this literally. And you can see why they're panicking. But models are greatly flawed. The clouds constitute the largest single source of uncertainty in climate predictions. They can't get clouds right. They can't get radiation right, solar radiation, infrared radiation. The snow aging effect is not in there quite right. And so because of these things, these models are flawed. And you should only take them as ballpark guidance. And by the way, nature's run it for ourselves. If man has only caused 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit warming and carbon dioxide's gone up 30%, and other greenhouse gases have gone up an equivalency of 30% CO2, that means essentially CO2 has gone up 60% for only 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit warming. So a doubling of carbon dioxide should only cause a 1 degree Fahrenheit warming.
All right.
And even the model that's the minimum here was 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So even that was greatly exaggerated. So the models are greatly flawed, and we need to not believe them.
Beware of models from people who have an agenda.
Right.
Okay.
Eighth and last one, claims of increasing storms are equivocal. This was shown by Roger Pelkey in his latest book called The Climate Fix. There's no long-term change in hurricane landfalls. Actually, they declined. No long-term changes in drought. Floods from peak stream flow data have not increased. No changes in tornadoes or thunderstorms.
Now, isn't that list exactly the things that they told us would happen because of global warming?
Yes.
But when we look at the data, none of them have happened. I think
No.
it's really important to emphasize that.
Yeah, this is published in 2010.
Okay.
No long-term increase in East Coast winter storms. No long-term trends in either heat waves or cold spells. In other words, business as usual.
Yeah.
So to summarize all this, there is no consensus on global warming. Carbon dioxide has increased. We've measured it. Global temperature rises only 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit, but probably exaggerated. Natural processes account for more than half of this global warming. There's a strong bias towards harms, ignoring the good things that can happen. The cost to fight global warming is huge with little likely benefit. Computer models exaggerate temperature effects of doubling of carbon dioxide, and there's no proof of stronger storms. So my conclusion is we need more unbiased research, and we have time to do this.
Well, that's a relief. I think this is one of the most fair and balanced approaches to this that I've ever seen. There are people who want to ignore it all, and there are people who want to shake up all the people and make us live in fear. I think you've dug through all of that and you've given us the facts, which is a great service, not just to Christians, but to everyone. And so we're very grateful for a tremendous presentation.
You're welcome.
My friends, I want to tell you something. God's in charge. He's in charge of the heavens, and He's in charge of the earth, and He's in charge of the temperature. And I'll tell you something I like. I like the temperature in heaven better than I like the temperature in hell. And so I want to know that I know God through His Son, Jesus Christ. Because when I get to heaven, it's going to be a perfect temperature. And that's why I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to believe the lie. I want you to search for truth and live in the center of God's truth. And always remember this until we meet again. It's God's view that He created you. And that should be your worldview too. See you again soon here on Origins. And until then, God bless you.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program, number 1309, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is possible by the faithful prayers and financial support of you, our Cornerstone family.